So in this video, I want to respond to a question that came up on the channel. Great question, thanks for asking. And it's, why do some people have so much anxiety and worry and other people have almost no anxiety and worry? So what accounts for these individual differences? And I could talk about a lot of things, from genetics to trauma to support systems to brain organization, but I want to focus on something that's almost totally unnoticed here, at least here in the West. In the East, they have a basic philosophy that covers the dynamics of the mind itself. In fact, I could only find 4 people that at least talk about it a little bit. So Aldous Huxley talked about it. Alan Watts mentioned it in several lectures. Viktor Frankl talked about it, and he was a therapist, and he integrated it into his therapy, and he called it paradoxical intention. So one of his patients was a physician, and his hands sweat so profusely that he had so much anxiety because he had to shake hands with people all the time for his work. And so Victor said, look, what's happening here, you're trying so hard to not make your hands sweat. That's why they're sweating. So he said, let's do the opposite. Let's try with all your effort to make your hands sweat as profusely as possible. The moment he did this, the whole problem went away. And Carl Rogers, the psychologist, I also caught at least one example when he talked about self-improvement. And he said, well, isn't it ironic that when you quit self-improvement altogether, you'll find the self-improvement you were looking for? So all these examples are about the architecture of the mind and how there are 2 things when we look at this mechanics of mind. One is when the mind puts forth effort, pushes in a direction, it's met with a counterforce in the opposite direction. And so if I say, don't think of the number 13, then you just start thinking of number 13. If you've got an important meeting and the mind is saying, I need to go to sleep, the mind ironically keeps itself up all night and you get no sleep that night. Ironically, if you're trying to stay up for New Year's, you end up falling asleep at 11. But the second component to this is that it's about degree. So if there's a little effort, then the opposing force is just minimum. But if there's a lot of effort, so in psychology they call this choking. So someone, it's an easy shot, and they've made it 1,000,000 times. They could do it in their sleep, but this time they have to make the shot to win the game, and maybe it's some kind of finale or something. And so the mind desperately needs to make the shot, and then you're met with this counter oppositional force, and you end up missing. And so that's the 2 basic components to this. And anyone who's had a panic attack knows this, because maybe you started off with one anxious thought, but then it was met with some kind of like, I can't have this thought, and you try to repress it. But then that was met with a bigger thought, a more stressful, anxious thought that was once again tried to counter it with something even more forceful. And so it's our effort that gets us into trouble. And so one reason that we differ in terms of our anxiety and worry is because we differ in how much we're trying to counter it. In other words, some people just have a natural sense of acceptance, and they don't start playing the whole game of mind against mind. And see, that's the thing that got in the West deeply. So there's a whole philosophy of no effort in the East, and they deeply realized that the only way you can win the game of mind is to not play in the first place. And that's why they say that the only time water becomes clear is when it's left alone. So some of us are a little bit better at leaving it alone than others.